Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Esther Pan-Sloan, the head of Partnerships, Policy, and Communications at the United Nations Capital Development Fund, and we are honored that you've chosen to join us this morning and that we have such a distinguished panel of speakers to help us mark this landmark event, the launch of the first UN-affiliated exchange-traded fund. To start our program this morning, I'd like to welcome Douglas Yonis, head of exchange-traded funds at the New York Stock Exchange.
Thank you. So quiet in here. We're celebrating. We're celebrating. Welcome to the New York Stock Exchange. I just from early conversations, I can tell this is the first time many of you are walking into our building. So first and foremost, let me say welcome. We trace our roots back 226 years to a very humble beginning. We actually traded outside of the corner of Wall and Broad, and we traded our country's first bonds, our first debt. Alexander Hamilton himself helped work as Secretary of the Treasury to get our nation out of its early debt before our country fell into many of the places that we're all working together, and this partnership is working to keep from happening. And those early traders outdoors, as they started to grow and progress, decided we need to move indoors. And so when you walked in this morning, you walk into a building that was opened up in 1903 for many, many traders and is now a global enterprise and a place where people who want to go and change the world and make the world a better place can come here and they can raise the money to do so, whether it's an exchange-traded fund like we're celebrating today in partnership with the UN, or individuals. I always come back to an individual like Jack Ma, who started Alibaba. A few of you saw him traded when we went to the floor. You saw where he's traded. Literally bringing millions of people out of poverty, right? Literally bringing millions of people and giving them an economic future, right? Literally bringing millions of people every single day and giving them a chance and giving them hope and giving them a sustainable future, right? Many of, for those of us that have the opportunity to wear the pin today, many of the goals that this ETF is designed here today to produce and progress. So I just want to say welcome. Enjoy the time here at the New York Stock Exchange this morning. Want to say congratulations. We're in an awkward spot to present, but I'm not sure if I want to hand you the things. But maybe if I could ask, I could ask Ethan and Judith and Sadia if you could come and join us next to each one of the listing certificates as I present them to you. I hope that when you take these back to your offices and you hang them up on the wall, that you think not just about this great event, but the 17th goal, right, which is the partnership to make all of these goals come true. And that's really what we're celebrating here at the New York Stock Exchange, our partnership. And congratulations to each one of you. You can give them a round of applause. Yeah. Okay, so back to Esther. Enjoy the conference this morning. Enjoy your time here at the New York Stock Exchange.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug. I'm very pleased to now welcome the Executive Secretary of UNCDF, Judith Carl, to make some remarks.
So, good morning, everyone. I have to say this is fun. It's interesting that about a week and a half ago, I was in a meeting in the EcoSoc chamber at the United Nations with about 550 institutional investors and financial advisors. And they were brought there for a discussion about their role in supporting the SDGs and ESG investing. And for them, being in the United Nations was just something unheard of, something exciting, something new, and something they definitely wanted to repeat a year from last week's date. And then this week, here we are, here at the New York Stock Exchange, and it's such an interesting exchange of experience and being in new places that we haven't in the past necessarily thought about going to look for the kinds of partnerships that are really all about achieving the SDGs. It's what that agenda is all about. So it's very exciting for us to be here, and I'm very thrilled for this terrific turnout. So let me go on script now and say welcome to all of you and thank you all for coming. I'm Judith Carl, and I lead the United Nations Capital Development Fund, which, as some, maybe not all of you know, is an agency of the United Nations. We've been around since 1966, and our main aim is to make finance work for the poor in the world's least developed countries, of which there are now 47 so classified, called the LDCs. It's only in the last few years that public agencies like ours and private investors have started really to collaborate and to make more capital flow to investments that not only generate profits, but are also helping to tackle poverty, to empower women, and to safeguard our environment, to name a few. So what better place for all of us really to be launching this new initiative to show how making money can also actually make a big difference for poor people than here at the New York Stock Exchange. I'm delighted to welcome you for the launch of what we consider to be a truly innovative vehicle, an exchange-traded fund that UNCDF created in collaboration with ImpactShares. As the United Nations General Assembly is opening this week, so a very timely moment, we think it's very fitting to be ushering in a new model of how the financial industry can work together with the United Nations and other socially minded organizations to create lasting positive impacts in the world. The United Nations announced its 17 Sustainable Development Goals a couple of years ago, and since then, we've consistently heard from our partners in the financial industry that there are not enough pragmatic, direct, and transparent ways to align their money with their values. There's especially strong demand for investments that support the achievement of the SDGs while creating both financial return and measurable, credible development impact. This ETF, we think, is one answer to that demand. The ImpactShares Sustainable Development Goals Global Equity ETF selects 200 companies through a very rigorous screening process that UNCDF helped to develop. We judge private sector companies on how well they are supporting the economic growth and prospects of citizens in the least developed countries. We hope our indicators, which are public, will encourage more companies to report on key environmental, social, and governance factors so they too can join the index. We also hope to increase the number of companies from the LDCs themselves that can be included in the index over time. Another key innovation about this ETF is its structure. By partnering with ImpactShares, a nonprofit fund manager also supported by Rockefeller Foundation, we at UNCDF could be sure that this product reflected UN goals and our mandate to support the LDCs. We also were reassured that any new ETFs that would be consistent with our values and our vision. And by donating a majority of the ETF's management fee to UNCDF as a charitable contribution, ImpactShares is also demonstrating that it shares our values and has the same goal of using the financial markets to help the world's poorest countries grow their economies in sustainable, equitable ways that lift their citizens out of poverty. Let me thank all the dedicated individuals who made this revolutionary product possible. Ethan, of course, with your team at ImpactShares, Saja Mosberg and her innovative financing team at the Rockefeller Foundation, especially Adam Conacher, who is here with us. I don't know where you are, Adam. From UNCDF, of course, our very own Francesco Ambrogetti, who has made this a work of love and passion. Francesco, where are you? There he is, and has really brought this from start to finish for us, supported by Esther Pan-Sloan, of course, who you've already met this morning and has done a terrific job, and supported by our UNDP legal office, Cynthia LeCool and Matilda Paksuk-Slowacek. Many of you may understand, and many of you probably don't understand, what a leap this is for the UN, and what it meant for our legal office to accompany us in this process, to support this, and to really feel, I think, the enthusiasm for what we're doing here. So thank you so much to our legal colleagues. They all helped us really push the boundaries of what the UN has done in the past and can do. And of course, our very loyal supporters is UNCDF, including our very important partners, Sweden and Switzerland, who have joined us here, and of course Bangladesh, whom you will also hear from later on. So thank you to all. We're very thrilled to have you all today. We hope it's the beginning of a new era of products that will tap the power of the financial markets to support sustainable development outcomes, particularly for the world's poorest countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judith. Our next speaker will be Ethan Powell, CEO of ImpactShares.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Judith. I think everyone in this room should really feel very proud and accomplished for what we collectively have accomplished here today. I look around, we've got lead market makers from Reggie Brown from Cantor Fitzgerald, we've got Joe LaGrasta from Virtu, we've got Jane Street, who helped seed the fund. We've got Sustainalytics, who is an industry-leading ESG research provider that has contributed countless hours of effort trying to bring this solution to the market. Morningstar is the index provider. We've got SEI here, who is the fund administrator. Boney is the custodian. Don Guiney is my general counsel, has been working for well over a year pro bono and leading up our Martha's Vineyard office, which so in case you felt too bad for So I guess my point is, and actually Rachel Evans from Bloomberg, I'm going to use a quote that she took from me, and the quote was, "We're more than wolves on Wall Street," right? So if you look around this room, a lot of great people are in this industry, a lot of great people in this room that really share the goals, the dreams, and aspirations of the United Nations and the 17 SDGs. And I couldn't be prouder of everybody here. And obviously, thank you for the trust that you have in ImpactShares and all of our wonderful partners. So really appreciate it. So anyway, obviously we're here to celebrate the initial listing of the UN Sustainable Development Goals ETF. It's actually ticker SDGA. And the reason it's SDGA is this is the first in the series, right? There's 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It's unreasonable to think that we can accomplish all of these social goals with one ETF. So we may not have 17, but we're definitely going to have more than one. And if you look at what ImpactShares is really trying to do, we're bridging capital to cause. Don and I speak of ourselves as really, we're a utility service provider, right? We've got wonderful partners like the YWCA here in the room with our Women's Empowerment ETF. And really what they're doing is elevating their brand to be the ambassador of the Me Too movement in the private sector. Helping the private sector navigate these tricky waters we're in. And in a climate, particularly a political one, that we've got the midterm elections coming up, is so divisive and so polarizing, to have these people willing to say, I will lead, I will help. We're not all fighting against one another. We're actually here to serve one another, and we can't do this alone, is really provides a lot of confidence for me in sort of the trajectory of humanity, that we don't have to be as divisive as the media might make us out to be. So thank you, Dory. Thank you, Marvin Owens, who's from the NAACP, who also, we've got a minority empowerment ETF as well, that's doing similar work in the Black Lives Matter movement, sort of elevating that cause into the boardroom. As it relates to the UNCDF, it's unique, in part because all of our, as Judith mentioned, all of our net advisory proceeds go back to help fund the general operating budget of our nonprofit social advocacy groups. In the case of the UN, no offense, but I don't think many people want to give the UN more money just generally as an individual, because you're so well funded in such a large global organization. So what they've done is they've actually identified a last mile financing vehicle to really help deliver the impact that we're looking for in the least developed countries. So if you think about the index, as Judith described, we're trying to identify those top 200 multinational companies doing the most, not only within the SDGs, but actively engaged in the 47 least developed countries where the SDGs really can make a difference. So we have revenue boosters and profitability boosters if you are actively engaged in making a capital commitment to those 47 LDCs. And then on the other side, so that's kind of it's a barbell approach, with the one side attracting capital in a creative and humane way into the 47 LDCs. On the other side, we're redirecting the net advisory proceeds not to a general operating budget, but to fund risk capital for small to medium-sized companies in the 47 LDCs. Because modern infrastructure isn't valuable unless there are people on the ground engaged and know how to use that modern infrastructure. And that's really what we're trying to accomplish here. So an investment in this fund is really a demonstration to your commitment to sustainable development goals and lifting up the most impoverished people in the world, and your organization's commitment towards those goals. The fund itself is designed to provide a global equity market rate of return, so you're not going to be sacrificing anything, and you're going to be maximizing your impact. So please invest. We've got the fund up and running, ticker SDGA. We're excited to have it. More to come. We'll be engaging with all of you in the not too distant future. And then you'll be hearing from Sadia Madsberg from the Rockefeller Foundation. She runs our innovative finance group. They funded ImpactShares. They funded all of this, and we couldn't have done this without you guys. So really, really appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of your morning.
Thank you. So we'd like to invite Sadia Madsberg, Managing Director from the Rockefeller Foundation, to speak next.
Thank you so much. I'll start by going off script and say thank you to Doug for the fascinating background and short history lesson that you gave us. I have 3 kids, and in our home we've actually been talking a lot about Alexander Hamilton for reasons unrelated to this ETF. But in the last week in particular, I was trying to explain what financial systems mean, what they stood for back then, what they stand for today. And I'd love to see what you said earlier today be translated into a kid's book. So we get to a point where it's much easier for all of us to understand and engage. But no, it's wonderful to be here this morning, and we've gotten here after a lot of hard work. Ethan, I think, has a lot of scars and war stories to tell as well. Just in terms of how we came at it and why we funded this work. Since the beginning, since the adoption of the 17 SDGs, it's been quite clear that there was a big role for capital markets to play in achieving those goals, just because of the sheer lack of funding that's available in public budgets and philanthropic budgets as well. And if you look at the business community as well as investors, there have been a lot of asks. There have been a lot of asks from the public institutions and from philanthropy when it comes to business activities, when it comes to asset allocation, when it comes to making investment decisions. It's notoriously hard. It requires a lot of things like creativity, risk-taking, patience being a key word, and collaboration. And bringing all of these things together sometimes is, the toughest part. We think philanthropy has an important role to play in that, in bringing all of those elements together. And as I look back at the history of the foundation, and we've been around for more than 100 years and sought out promising ideas and funded the development of those ideas, I think that we have seen the power of bringing together unconventional partners. And I think everybody you see up here and in the audience, I would call unconventional partnership as well. And I think the SDGA ETF is a prime example of what can happen when you succeed. One thing I'll say is, Rockefeller Foundation, some of you may know this, you may not, but we coined the term impact investing around 10 years ago. And I think 10 years ago, people would never have imagined that something called a social ETF would actually get to be part of the universe of what is impact investing. But I think it's a testament to how far we've come collectively in terms of pushing our own thinking, in terms of truly trying to understand what capital markets need and want and how they act and how you can bridge it with the world of development and social change. So I think also the ETF in particular is an example of how you can further stretch into new markets and into new investors as well. I think it's a testament to how you can do something in the public equity space that doesn't get discredited when it comes to the impact side, because that was a big challenge, at least for those of us that were working in the development space, to say how do you really drive impact through public equities as opposed to, say, private equity. And then I also think that it's a great way of making this market available to regular people that actually have control over a lot of investment capital but haven't been able to engage in this space where they could align their values with their investing. So there are a lot of people, as Judith and Ethan were talking about it as well, that have been part of getting us to this place. And I'd like to thank everyone, but in particular, I'd like to thank Francesco, Esther, and Judith from the UNCDF team for willing to try out this thing and for being pioneers. And then for Ethan to take all of the experience that he's had for many years in the capital markets and say, how do you translate it and bridge it to the world that talks about development goals. So thank you everyone for coming, and thank you everyone for being part of this.
Thank you so much, Sajid. Our next speaker will be Dr. Mashir Rahman, Economic Advisor to the Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh.
Good morning, and thanks to the organizers for inviting. Let me share with you some of the developments of our stock exchange. The last 10 years or so, we had a fairly stable market. There was no great upheaval. So that did establish confidence in the stock market. The stock market, however, has not played a very significant role in providing investment resources for major industries. We are still mainly budget dependent. But having said that, let me mention two events which had happened recently. One is Alibaba has taken about 25 or 30% share in Bcash, which is the largest mobile transfer money mechanism in the world at the moment. The second is China has taken about 35% stake in Bangladesh Stock Exchange. These are two great events which integrate Bangladesh's stock market with the world stock market. I mentioned these two events in order to see that the global market is moving in a way which brings the individual national markets together, and this is an event which we should note. As to the impact, it seems that we had an impression that business and normal investment is not in the interest of poverty alleviation. Take the Wall Street movement. But right now we can think, bring in the Wall Street, that the business can be also for poverty alleviation and for helping the poor. Is the greatest achievement. The sea change of mentality and bringing together the mainstream economy activities and the poverty alleviation focus, the social goals of development, bringing this together is a great achievement. I thank the innovators for what they have done, the hard work they have done, and I'm very happy to know that the training will launch today and we are here today. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, sir. Our next speaker will be Eva Svedling, State Secretary for Global Development and International Climate Policy of Sweden.
Good morning, and thank you, and thanks very much to UNCDF and Executive Director, the Secretary Judith Karl, and to ImpactShares for the invitation of this very exciting launch. I'm very glad to be here representing Sweden. Sweden being a very strong proponent of the need for private sector to contribute to financing and the implementation of the whole Agenda 2030 and the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. And institutions like the UNCDF have a very central and vital role to play to get the private sector involved, and we need to create in the future more new innovative partnerships to be able to implement the agenda. And Sweden, as the UNCDF's largest donor, we welcome the initiative being launched today, and that the UNCDF is entering into new kinds of innovative partnerships with non-traditional actors. And I think, as I said, we need to see more of that in the future. And I would like to share with you some examples on private sector engagements from Sweden. The network Swedish Investors for Sustainable Development is a partnership comprising 17 institutional investors, that is pension companies, investment companies, and the Swedish International Development Corporation, that explores the role of investors in the SDG, and we need those new collaborations in the future. And SIDA has also developed an ambitious guarantee instrument together with IFC and the Asian Development Bank. Sweden has for a long time been a driving force in green financing, including green bonds, guarantees and blending financing. For example, already in the year 2008, the World Bank, in collaboration with the Swedish bank SEB, created a green bond, the first of its kind. And a few years later, the Swedish insurance company Vasakronan was the first in the world to issue a green corporate bond. And last year, Sweden launched the Stockholm Sustainable Finance Center, collaboration with academia, which will promote sustainable finance and contribute to the urgently needed scale-up of green and sustainable investments. I would also like to point out the importance of the academy being a part of those new collaborations. And we are hoping, of course, to see more examples in the future, and we are working actively to engage Swedish companies, not only companies, foundations, banks, and investors in this work. Not only to fund and create more products and services, that's one thing, creating new materials that can directly align with the SDGs and support of the work of the UN. But even more importantly, I would like to say, to encourage entire business models and new business models that support the implementation of the 2030 agenda. We need to be creative, and I think we are going to see new business models that we don't know of yet. Business, the UN and development system, they need also to bridge diverging cultures and incentive structures to create new sound partnership, and that can harness innovation, promote sustainability, and make stakeholders unite in what we need to be done to meet the global challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our final speaker is Dr. Manuel Sager, Director General of the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. I'm very happy to represent Switzerland, Swiss government here this morning. Some of you may wonder, why Sweden and Switzerland? Well, sometimes we team up just to keep up the confusion. Also, we have our own financing instruments, sustainable financing instruments like Swiss Sustainable Finance. And as you probably also know, some of the largest impact investment funds in the world are located in Switzerland. On the elevator up, I asked Ethan to explain to me how exactly ETF works. I'm afraid the elevator ride was not long enough to answer all my questions. I could have pressed the stop button for further clarification,
Yes.
but that probably would have gotten me arrested for kidnapping here in the building. But what I do understand, what I do know about the ETF really makes me proud to be associated with UNCDF for one thing, and then also indirectly with ETF. It is, of course, the teaming between, or the private sector working together with the public sector, as we all try to. That's not entirely a new development. We have been talking about the shared value and double and triple bottom line for quite some time. But as we all know, most of these investments, or many of these investments, partnerships, happen actually in emerging markets, and not in LDCs or other or in fragile contexts that we as development actors, where we really would like to see them. And this is where ETF comes in. And it's also a great example of SDG 17 at work, partnership between public sectors such as the Swedish government, the Swiss government, together with UNCDF and the Rockefeller Foundation, and ImpactShares. It's again, it's SDG 17 at work. How can we award risk-taking by the private sector in places where they normally wouldn't go? We SDC, we are looking forward, of course, to continue our contribution to UNCDF and hope to see many more instruments like this, and to help us leave no one behind, not only individuals, but also leave no country behind, particularly LDCs and fragile countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to all of our distinguished speakers. And thank you so much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. We are so grateful that you could come to be with us to celebrate this event. And we hope that with your support, we can make this ETF and others like it a successful way to help the United Nations achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you and enjoy your day.